Hello, everyone, and welcome to my temporary office for the moment. My office is actually in Sicelift 117, but as I told you in my announcements today, I'm skipping going out in the cold. And hopefully, for those of you who no longer have to go out in the cold today, or at least at 2 o'clock, hopefully that works out well for you as well. Today, we're going to be just doing a basic introduction to the class. For those of you who don't know, I teach this class as an online version and also in the classroom. And so while my classroom students can't just use the online videos, the online students, if you ever want to come in to sit with us between 2 and 3:15 in Sicelift 117 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you're more than welcome to do that. You're also all welcome to stop by my office hours, which are from 3:30 until 5 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then I'll also do online by appointment, whatever you want, whatever works for you, whatever's convenient. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Dudash Buskirk, and this is CALM 350, the Rhetorical Tradition and Contemporary Applications. For those of you who are in the online version of this class, you will be hearing from me about once a week, maybe twice, depending on whether or not you need more information. The in-classroom students, you know that you're going to be seeing me twice a week. So the online version is a little bit more flexible, I guess, or you could view it as flexible, but I view each of the weeks as sort of a learning period of some kind. So there will probably be lectures put out on Monday for the online students, and then for those of you in the classroom, we'll be able to have full discussions on Tuesdays and Thursdays of that week. And essentially, we'll keep the same schedule, but there are going to be things that happen in the classroom that do not happen online. And so it's important for me to keep those two separate and distinct, but also for you to know that, more discussion happens usually in the classroom, and thereby questions can get answered much more easily. I so prefer being in the classroom. But for online, we can sort of supplement the lack of that discussion with the discussion boards. So there will be a place for you to ask questions if you need to throughout the semester, if they're content-based. If they're a question about a test or a grade or something like that, I'm going to ask you to email me directly. However, the discussion board should be a good place for you to join your peers in having a conversation about something that maybe you don't understand, or you don't think they might understand, or that somebody might be able to explain to you a little bit better. So let's use these tools that we've been given to make the semester easier on all of us. How do we do that? How do we get through this class with our A that we want to have, or whatever grade it is that you want to have? It's pretty easy. The syllabus is your best friend. That will give you a schedule of reading that I think is pretty reasonable throughout the semester. Is there a lot of reading? Yes. Is it about 2/3 of what I used to assign? Yes. So we are doing less reading and more interaction with each other. That doesn't mean you're doing more homework assignments. My assignments are actually exactly the same. But it does mean that you and I need to spend some time together, be it through extended lectures for those of you online, or in the classroom for those of you who are taking the seated class. So hopefully that helps clarify a little bit about what can you do when you feel like you're lost in the class. The first thing, syllabus. The second thing, I try to keep the grades up and posted within about 2 weeks of each assignment. I've been pretty good about doing that. So I think that you will find that you'll get your grades in a reasonable amount of time, that you're able to determine exactly where you are in the class. Assignments are always listed on Blackboard, whether you're in the classroom or you're online. It does not matter. Assignments are put on Blackboard. That way you have access to them when you need them. So hopefully that will make things easier for you. As for scheduling, well, the thing that takes the most time in this class, there's two things: the readings and the second paper. So for the second paper, you're going to have over about 6 weeks. You're going to have about 6 weeks, somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks to do that assignment. The reading is something you're going to have to discipline yourself on over the course of each week, however you do that. Read on your schedule, but try to keep it within that week so that you know what the lecture is about. The lecture will focus on what's on the schedule. Why do you have to take this course? What is this all about? What is it you're supposed to get from it? What is it you're supposed to learn? So whenever you hear the word rhetoric, we all have different ideas about what that might mean. A lot of you probably have negative connotations to it. So the first thing I try to do is dispel those negative and inaccurate definitions of rhetoric. Rhetoric is not just empty language. It's not just flowery, meaningless language. It's not something we use to trick other people. Instead, the definition of rhetoric really goes back to Aristotle. So we're talking about 400 BCE, roughly, when he was writing to us that rhetoric was defined in a very specific way for him. And this is the definition that we are going to use. No other definitions should come in. Whenever I ask you how to define rhetoric, this is always the answer. Always. So this will always be the answer. It is the art or skill of knowing. So it's an art or a skill of knowing all the means of persuasion, including power situations, language, situation, all of those things, in any instance. So any way you write that definition, as long as it has the three parts, that it's an art or a skill, that it is knowing all the means of persuasion in any given instance. As long as you have those three together, you'll be fine. I don't care what order they come in. I don't care if you use the exact wording. None of that. Everything's fine. But those three elements are important because they help guide how it is that we're supposed to be actually using ethically the power of rhetoric. So let's break that down really quickly. It's an art or a skill of knowing, meaning it is something that either you have a talent for naturally and you have to hone and practice, or it's something that doesn't come to you naturally and you have to learn how to do it. So it's an art or skill of knowing things. In this case, of knowing, the second part, all the means of persuasion. What are all the means of persuasion? Well, for Aristotle, he really broke it down into just a couple of, three modes of persuasion. But he also gives us all of these other things that we need to know about persuasion. The power relationship of the audience and the speaker, the context or the rhetorical situation in which an artifact is occurring. And we have to know what words to use when. So language strategies. He has three kinds, if we want to say, or three genres, if you want to look at it that way, three genres of rhetoric that he talks about. And that is that he believes that rhetoric should be practiced in the epideictic sense, which is a ceremonial sense. So if you have a marriage, you might have a toast. If you have a graduation, you'll have a commencement speech. If you have a funeral, you'll have a eulogy. If you have a celebration, a presidential inaugural, for example, you'll have the inaugural address. If people get married, you'll have a eulogy. See how that goes? Just kidding. It's great. I'm married. I'm just kidding. Saying, some people see that as a problem. However, it would be inappropriate. So let's keep it to the appropriate level of persuasion in any given speech. So ceremonial address is not usually one that we spend a lot of time on in this class, mainly because, there are so many examples of them out there, but they are the kind of speech that you're probably going to encounter, I should say, out when you get a job. All right, so that's one. The other one is deliberative, which basically means you're sitting around trying to deliberate on something, figuring something out, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. So most of the time, this is in our government, in Congress specifically, legislating. That type of speech is about social policy. Whenever we are at a rally or we're listening to Congress argue, whether that's at the state or federal level, that's deliberative, okay? And then finally, we have what's known as judicial. And the judicial, shockingly, occurs in a courtroom most of the time. This is where you are taking apart and putting back together something that has already occurred and figuring out how to construct it or look at it or imagine it. So you go into a courtroom, there's usually two choices, guilt and innocence, right? And you have a judge and you have 12 jurors sometimes, and they determine whether or not someone is guilty or innocent. And so in this type of rhetoric, it is for an audience that includes more than just the judge. It includes all of the people that are in the courtroom, specifically the jury, when you want them to be persuaded to whichever side you're on, right? So that is judicial. And those three are the and by the way, just so you know, judicial is often called forensic. And one of the things that I've learned more than anything is that people don't know what the word forensics means, because we hear like CSI, right? Like you're cutting a body apart, you're doing a forensic analysis of an account, you're, well, what are you doing with it? You're taking it apart and putting it back together to see what's really going on. And that's what forensic rhetoric does. It takes something apart, breaks it down, analyzes it, and feeds back what is really being said, what it really means. And you're going to be engaging in that by the end of the semester. In fact, you're going to be, via writing, more than speaking, demonstrating your knowledge of all three of these genres. What is it that they have in common, though? Well, what they have in common is that they are all about mass influence. None of them are interpersonal. None of them are about how to get a date. None of them include lying in their definition. All of them, though, are mass influence. So when Aristotle looks at what rhetoric is, an art or skill of knowing in any particular instance all the means of persuasion, he means of a particular artifact. That artifact, whether it's a speech or a writing, a movie, an advertisement, a political campaign, it does not matter what it is. That artifact is the goal of it is mass influence. You're looking to persuade a group, a large group usually, sometimes a group of 30 people at a school board meeting. It just depends. So he says understanding all of those things in the genre in which it is occurring is important to being successful. Okay, we know that, hopefully. These are things you've probably learned already, and you might be wondering, why is she starting with Aristotle's definition of rhetoric? Well, the reason I'm starting with Aristotle's definition of rhetoric is because that's the one we're going to use. And it's going to be compared to a lot of other definitions. Other theorists have other definitions that, they will propose. And what we need to do is to sort of figure out what those other definitions actually mean. Why do we need them? Is Aristotle's the only one that we need? Well, those other definitions help us understand the rhetorical situation that we're in any given time, so that we can understand all of the means of persuasion that are being encountered, okay, and being able to know what those are. So we don't actually start reading Aristotle. In fact, we won't get to him for a little bit. We're going to start reading a little earlier than that. So one of the things I wanted to let you know was I realized I didn't put the book on the syllabus. That was my bad. Hopefully you all got the secondary announcement that I sent with the link to the Amazon book, the book on Amazon, and hopefully you got to see that there were rental options. There are digital options for this book. It is a very heavy, very big book. We don't read it all. We read pieces and portions of it, but it's probably the best text right now that I can find that gets in everything I want to get in. And that's why we use it. I don't necessarily think that anybody should buy it unless they have some really, really big desire to have a gigantic philosophy and history book on their mantle. I even have a digital copy. Yeah, that's true. It's a lot lighter. But some people don't like to read on the digital, and I totally understand that as well. So feel free to get the book, rent the book, keep the book, don't keep the book. Personally, I would rent it. I would rent it for either digitally or physically. So that's my encouragement to you on the book. But you do need it. And so over the course of the first week, I don't usually rely too much on you all getting that read. I schedule the introduction for you to read, and that's about it. So you will be hearing from me again next Monday, of course. And in that, next Monday for online students, you will see me Thursday for those of you who are in my classroom. And if you don't have the book yet, that's okay. Try to get it by the end of the week or the beginning of the next week. That will be very helpful to you. If you have it already, go ahead and start reading. Whatever you want to start reading, the introduction is basically all we're going over right now. So there are very specific page numbers on there. Sometimes you may find that, hopefully you have the third edition. If you have a different edition, the page numbers probably won't be exactly the same. So we'll have to work that out between us. But if you have the third edition, those page numbers are very specific. And I know that some of them might seem like we're jumping around or we're not quite finishing a theorist. Some of these theorists, we've got editions of their work. And keep in mind, these are just excerpts of their work. Some of them, we've got those excerpts and there's like 5 excerpts and it's like 500 pages. I'm not going to make you read that. In fact, you'll see on there that there are a couple of theorists that I say, just skim this, okay? I'll take care of the rest of it. Don't worry about it too much. That's because it would just be way too much reading for you and it's unnecessary. So hopefully that will help you as you look at that incredibly daunting book and the schedule. As you may or may not have realized, I'm a big fan of you actually showing me what you know. I happen to think that exams show me what you don't know if I put some great limitation on it. So here's how I use exams. I do give you 3 exams. They are just to make sure that you're reading, that you're getting the information that you need in order to be able to do your papers, to perform your work, and to be able to engage in an intellectual discussion about the practice of rhetoric and what it actually is. So I hope that helps you a little bit. You'll see on the syllabus there's course goals. You'll see that there are the assignments, and you'll see that there is my grading schedule. Online, not only will you find the syllabus, but you should also be able to find a grading rubric for all essays. I'm going to go through and double check and make sure that they're all up this afternoon, but I believe I put them up on all of the classes that I'm teaching. That grading rubric is for any paper that you write for me, okay? So look at that rubric. If you want to know how do I get an A on this paper, the rubric tells you how to do it. So hopefully that will make it easier for you. And instead of focusing on spending lecture time or discussion time or anything else on the sort of various how many points get off for spelling or whatever question it is that we might have, that we can focus on the content of the course. That's the goal. So that's essentially how the entire semester is going to play out. We're going to take this chronologically, and we're going to start with what's known as a group or a school, essentially, of thought known as sophists. Those sophists still exist today. Most of the time we refer to them as lawyers and teachers, okay? Those sophists and how they practiced are going to set us up for when the philosophers come in with rhetoric. And you'll understand the distinction between those two. When we start with rhetoric, we're going to start at the beginning. Aristotle, Plato, I, Socrates, and a few others. And we will move through not just classic Greece, but into classic Rome. Once we leave classic Rome, there is, depending on which historian you talk to, somewhere between 8 and 1600 years of rhetoric, quote, being lost. That's what a lot of people said. It's called the Dark Ages or the medieval period, and I want you to know that rhetoric was not abandoned and that it was in fact used, but it was used in a very specific way for a very specific purpose. This is all in the Western Hemisphere, by the way, and we'll talk about why that is later on in the semester. So during that 800 to 1600 years, depending on how you look at it, which, by the way, is somewhere between like a third and 2/3 of the entire time that we study, right? It's like, it's a crazy amount of time. And we don't spend a whole lot of time there, because when we get out of the Dark Ages, out of the medieval period, into the Renaissances, where humans begin to ask more questions that require better answers. And as we develop more tools to answer questions about the universe, our world, human nature, etc., then the way that we think about these things automatically changes what we think about these things. So we will go through a time period in the Renaissances into the early modern period where we're questioning whether or not science plays into rhetoric, reasoning plays into rhetoric, whether rhetoric is just, as we say, empty stylistic language that doesn't say anything, or is it more meaningful than that? I think you know which side I'm going to come out on, but we will study what's known as the elocutionary period a little bit, where they focus purely on nonverbal delivery and style of things as rhetoric, as rhetorical studies, and we'll talk about that. At the same time, we've got this science and reasoning, courtroom rhetoric developing, and that will move us into the more modernistic approaches, where we have things like an argument model coming from Stephen Toulmin. We'll have models coming from Kenneth Burke of how rhetoric is supposed to work. And then finally, we'll move into what we call contemporary rhetoric, or rhetoric from the quote-unquote postmodern era, which is sort of a misnomer, because it's not like modernism and postmodernism follow each other. It's more like they're in debate with each other. So we'll talk about that when we get there. This is later in the semester, obviously. So what I'd like you to understand is that we will follow this journey chronologically. And so it will seem like a historical perspective at times, but what is it that you're supposed to get out of all this anyway? Why do you need to study this history, this philosophy, this way of thinking about rhetoric if you're getting a communication degree? And the answer to that is very simple. Everything that you study, no matter what kind of theory it is in communication, it comes from the study of rhetoric. It comes from the basic question of not persuasion tactics for marketing, but being able to have mass influence. So knowing where all this comes from will really help you in all your other courses, really. But most of the time, people don't take this till they're a senior, and then it's way too late. So for those of you who are taking it as a senior, first semester or second semester senior, or you're like, wow, this was really late in the program, that's because it is heavy on the reading, heavy on the writing, and I expect you to think critically. So you need to do a little bit time in college before you can get to those 3 activities and be really, really successful at them. So that's why the course is $350 instead of, say, I don't know, $215 or something like $209, and $210. It probably should be known that $209 and $210 sort of flow along with this class. In $209, you learned all about theory. In $210, you learned about the methods of practicing that theory. In this course, we are going to learn about rhetorical theory, and we're going to talk about rhetorical methods and how to use them. So hopefully you can see those parallels. If you have anything that you're confused about or questions that you're worried about or why I didn't turn my cell phone off and there keeps being dinging over there, just let me know. And I am so looking forward to being back in the classroom with those of you I'm going to be in the classroom with. And I'm looking forward to recording every week for those of you who are not, because I think I have decided that they all need to be revamped. I've kind of become that jaded college professor who just keeps showing you the same videos I've recorded in the past 3 years, and maybe not just my hair color changes, my style changes, you all change, references change, examples change. So I'm looking forward to rebooting this course a little bit over the course of this semester. Thank you all for coming along with the journey. I will be in touch with you next week. I will see some of you on Thursday. In the meantime, let me know if you have any trouble getting a hold of the book, getting a hold of the syllabus, Blackboard, anything at all. And yes, you may text me on my home phone number. That's why I gave it to you, if you'd like. You don't have to feel pressure to do that. I will say this. I am much better with that than I am with email. Emails can sometimes get lost. So if I do not respond to your email within 24 hours on a week or 48 hours on the weekend, then please, by all means, send me a text or call me if you want to and say, hey, I dropped you an email. Can you go look at it? And I will do that. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often. Okay, all, you stay warm out there. It's pretty chilly. It's very sunny, but it's very chilly. I feel like I moved back to Minnesota or something. And I'll talk to you soon.